Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I have with me today Mr. Chidanand Rajghatta. He's a senior industry colleague, a journalist, and now also an author. And we have with him today at ThePrint SoftCover to release his new book, which is called Kamala Harris, Phenomenal Woman. So, Mr. Rajghatta, we have the book nicely wrapped for you. I'm going to unveil this, and here it is. It's a fantastic book. Let me show it to
Thank you.
my viewers again. So this is Kamala Harris, Phenomenal Woman, a Harper Collins publication. Congratulations on the book, Mr. Rajghatta.
Thank
To
you.
quickly understand and, thank you for giving us your time. The question that comes in everyone's mind, I don't know, at least in my mind to understand is, yes, this book was highly required. After all, you have, for the first time in history, a woman of color to become the US vice president. And who knows, maybe she'll be the president also. After reading your book, I get that sense all the more. But my first question to you will be, why are you calling her a phenomenal woman? Why not leave that judgment on the readers? So your thoughts on that, please.
Right. So the title actually comes primarily from a poem by Maya Angelou, a very famous, well-known poet. And she has one of her signature poems is Phenomenal Woman. And I felt it applied to Kamala Harris, not as a politician. I mean, there are two aspects to this. One, her personal life, the life of women of mixed race, mixed heritage, and there her achievement and her progress, through a political field in the U.S., starting in California, is truly phenomenal. You're correct that her performance as a vice president, that's something everybody will withhold judgment simply because she's early into her term. There's still 3 years to go for her first term of vice presidency. And we'll know at the end of it whether she's truly phenomenal in the political sense, in the political arena. But her personal track record, navigating through, U.S. political minefield, I'd say, particularly in California, is truly remarkable. And we have to remember that, like you said, she is, the first female vice president. And not just that, the female vice president of, mixed heritage, of Asian and, Caribbean heritage, Black heritage. And there's not been anybody like that. I mean, even Barack Obama, widely regarded as the first Black president, after all, was half white. People forget that his mother was white, all-American from, Kansas. Father was, of course, immigrant from Kenya. In Kamala's case, both her parents were foreigners, and essentially they came here as students. So that's unprecedented. Her dad was an economist who came from Jamaica, a mom from India, as we all know by now. So in that sense, she is somebody who has risen to this office, which not even all white women succeeded in getting. We know the track history now. Geraldine Ferrero was the first nominee for vice presidentship. She couldn't make it. Hillary Clinton couldn't make it for the presidency. So in that sense, her journey has been truly phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. And also, I understand that, when her name was being, nominated as the vice president, the euphoria that was there in India within the media and also within the general public as such. So I think that is where the book will really do well in terms of understanding what else is there to know about her. So one thing that you write in your book, which is very interesting, is the fact that no matter whether you want to be the president or the vice president in US politics, there's this unsaid rule where you have to, sort of prove that, yes, you are born in US and you are essentially an American, and you can't really talk about your roots no matter where they belong. And you say that that's like a kiss of death. So is that the reason why you think she sort of downplayed, the vice president downplayed, her Indian origin? Or do you think that, she needed to speak a lot more on other issues than talking about her roots in India?
Yeah, I think it's true. Most candidates who have any kind of, foreign touch about them tend to downplay, because there's always a nativist constituency in the United States, as there is in India right now, increasing. That if you're regarded as a foreigner or minority other than black, you kind of are stigmatized. This actually happens even on the Republican side. Ted Cruz, who has sort of Canadian ties, always downplayed it. So yes, you can understand Kamala Harris downplaying the Asian side in the political arena. And at the personal level, of course, she talks frequently of her Indian connections. And in fact, it's very interesting that her family, her mother passed away several years ago, but she's still very close to her Indian side of her family. Every election campaign, her aunts, who she calls chittis, actually come to the US and often are with her during the campaign. I've seen campaign events going back to when she was running for, Attorney General, where she turns around and in the middle of a speech and says, Chinny, where is Chinny? Chinny is her aunt from Canada. And also for her, various swearing in when she was sworn into office, her family is always here. Her Indian family, her chitti from Chennai, and her uncle Bala from Delhi. They came for her swearing in when she was sworn in as a senator by Joe Biden at that time, who was vice president. So she's, at a personal level, she has close ties with India. Politically, she likes to, keep it, be a little aloof. Also because, since you mentioned there was a great deal of, hysteria or whatever in India, we also tend to go over the top in India. Anything remotely Indian, we want to own it anywhere in the world. So I guess it's quite natural. I can understand that. But it's interesting that she's very proud to own her Black heritage and very quick to embrace her Black heritage. And that's also because, Blacks are considered part of America. Many Blacks and Black families in this country arrived before white families. There was, through slavery and so on, there was Black immigration in large numbers preceding, white immigration in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. But I guess, what you said is really true. And I think we don't really realize sitting in India how difficult it is especially for a woman to rise to that level. So my next question really would be, it might sound a little cliche, but basically, smashing the glass ceiling, how difficult it is, for women there to really make it big within the political landscape. Reading your book gives a whole lot of, insider information, and to understand that, although we know it is difficult, it is a monumental task that one realizes after reading your book. So do you think, given the realities that you've talked about, how easy or difficult it will be for her if she really is going to run for the presidential campaign?
Very difficult. I'd say it's very difficult because several reasons. All said and done, let's not forget that this is still a very, patriarchal society, like everywhere else in the world. It's probably gotten a little easier in some Scandinavian Nordic countries in Europe. Angela Merkel just had an incredible run in office. There are some countries in Africa. In South Asia, we have had a good, tradition of, female leadership. But remember, most of them had family ties and family connections. It was, dynastic or spousal in some cases. So in the US too, actually, and I've listed that out, many early, senators and lawmakers, female, had, spouses or, parents who were in politics, to make it independently, which is what Kamala has done. Essentially, she had no political background at all. Her mother was a social activist, but not political in that sense, nor was her father. So she's made it independently, and it's very hard. And it's particularly hard for a minority woman. So you know that if you read the book, one of Kamala's idols was Shirley Chisholm, who was of Black heritage and got nowhere simply because, this was the 60s and 70s where there was not a chance. But even into the 80s and 90s, women, Geraldine Ferrero or, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, who have been independent without family political ties, still found it, hard to ascend to the highest level. Hillary Clinton's a classic example. There is still the sense in this country, 240 plus years later, the 45 presidents, there's still not been a female president, and she's the first female vice president. There's still the barriers, glass ceiling is yet to be broken, even though women now constitutes actually the majority vote in the US. There are more females vote in US presidential election than men. It's still a formidable hurdle, one. And two, I think it's pretty well known and acknowledged that somehow the barriers are always higher for women. Women have to strive so much harder in every sphere of life, actually.
It's true everywhere.
It's everywhere. And, it's a universal sort of thing, that the barriers are always harder and higher for women. And we know that Kamala Harris is right now, her portfolio, she has such an incredibly heavy portfolio, the amount of things she's handling. The general conspiracy theory is that President Biden, loaded her with so much that she's bound to fail. It's, so many people have tried to accomplish, immigration reform. The smartest people in America have tried it and gotten nowhere, and she's been tasked with that. So it's just incredible. If she succeeds in, solving 2 or 3 of these problems, she has a very good shot. But it's really hard. And let's remember, she also has to. It's not that she's a shoo-in for the presidential nomination. She has to navigate her way through the party. There are all kinds of interests in the run-up to the Democratic nomination. There'll be a lot of hurdles she'll have to cross within the party before she can even think of, running for president. So she first has to clinch the nomination. So I see a lot of difficulty, and these are particularly tough times. America is going through both an existential crisis and an imminent economic crisis. So she has a hard road ahead of her, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll come to that part where you have talked about the fact that how she's been given some of the difficult tasks like immigration and COVID management and others. But before that, if you can discuss and take our readers, our viewers through her personal life, right? You've extensively written on that, the discord between her parents and how she did not like to go to Canada, but then she had no choice. And then her relationship with her sister Maya. So if you can give us a little synopsis of that.
Right. So a lot of it is now in public domain. It's well known. But what I found most remarkable is when her mother came, and a lot of people assume that her blackness comes from her father, who was Jamaican, very distinguished economics professor. But what I discovered, and this surprised me, was her mother turned black, so to say, even before she met Donald Harris, her future husband. So Kamala Harris came to Berkeley in 1958, in the fall of 1958, a very interesting journey. I actually tracked. She came from Kolkata to, flew east and came via Honolulu. Her entry stamp is in Hawaii, Honolulu, and then to San Francisco. And she came, and she straight away sort of got into the Black ecosystem, which was remarkable because here's a 19-year-old woman from Delhi, from an Tamil Iyer family, And incidentally, I describe in the book that Kamala Harris's middle name when she was born was Iyer. In the hospital birth certificate, it's listed as Iyer, and 2 weeks later they filed an affidavit to change it to Devi. So she's Kamala Devi Harris, but otherwise she would have been Kamala Iyer Harris. And her mother met Black activists almost straight off the bat when she was standing in line for her, for her admission to give in her papers. She had a Black guy next to her who turned out to be a very prominent activist later on. And she became friends with them and got into, Black activism at least 2 years before she met Donald Harris. So the sense that, she has, a Jamaican father and therefore, no, it was the mother who was actually the primary influence in her sort of Black experience. And she grows up in a neighborhood which is again predominantly Black, with Black neighbors at that time, and her formative years they moved to the Midwest. They spent time in Wisconsin and Illinois, and then her parents separate because they're both professionals in an academic world where things can be tough. And her parents separate, and Shyamala and the girls, Kamala and Maya, come back to Berkeley, where, as a single mother, Shyamala is forced to depend on her Black neighborhood to take care of the girls because she's a scientist. She's going to, Livermore Labs to work there, long hours. So the girls after school literally live with their Black neighbors who run a sort of school, a creche. And they grow up, the girls grow up Black. And the dad is not in the picture, dad is in the Midwest. And so it's very interesting that Blackness comes from the mother's side, not so much the dad's side. And then they go to Canada in the 70s, the mid 70s. And by now, the girls are preteens, 11, 12. And they go to Montreal, which is a predominantly white city at that time. And it's actually around the time of the Montreal Olympics in 1976. And even there, they sort of hang out a lot with the few Blacks and minorities who are there. And Kamala can't wait to come back to US and to Berkeley and to go back to her, old stomping ground and Black neighborhood and Black friends. And then what she does is instead she has to she graduates from high school there and comes to Howard University in Washington, which is a historically Black university. So she thrives and she embraces Black ecosystem and her Blackness more than anything else, and a lot of it comes from her mother.
Mm-hmm. So also I believe she gets a lot of this thing about strength and to be determined also from her mother, what I could make out from your book and also by reading other sources. But do you think, as you said, that her mother was in the Black ecosystem for since the beginning, and do you think that also sort of made Kamala what she is today, and that activism spirit in her, is that still there? Do you think we are going to see more of that as time progresses?
Well, I'd say that she's now a little more cautious. She's by no stretch. Her parents, let's be very plain. Her parents were like socialists, as many of the right wingers say. There's no secret. That's no secret. They openly embraced it, and Donald Harris has written about it. And plenty of other sources. I spoke to many of their contemporaries, including there were people like Lord Meghnad Desai and Amartya Sen I mentioned in the book. And this again surprised me that Amartya Sen was teaching in Berkeley at the same time, and her parents were friends with Amartya Sen. And another economist named Ajit Singh, who was a Sikh scholar and a contemporary and a student of former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. So they embraced left-wing politics, and Kamala too initially, but she is now in a country where socialism is a taboo word. So she's more centrist, actually. I mean, she's not exactly part of the squad, which are the left liberal lawmakers, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Pramila Jayapal and others. She's more center. So yeah, she's become much more cautious. She has to navigate a very tricky political terrain. But her mother, I mean, in one sense, so I need to explain that this book actually began when I started working on a profile of her mother, because it just fascinated me that, a young 19-year-old, Tamil Iyer girl from India comes to the US and, gets into this black system. I was also intrigued because a lot of that was the early generation of Indian students coming to US in significant numbers. I mean, there was people who came even before. I mean, Jayaprakash Narayan came in the 40s, Ambedkar, and so on. But in the late 50s and early 60s, they were, because of the sort of closeness between the Eisenhower administration and Nehru, and later Kennedy, Nehru, US and India were pretty close at that time. They had gotten close for a while. And my dad was part of that generation. He came to the US also late 50s, around 1960. And so I discovered was the parents of the US ambassador to, the Indian ambassador to US, Taranjit Sandhu's parents also were at Ohio in the same period. So this was a generation, which came, and I was just incredibly struck by, Kamala's mother and how she came to the US. And I kept wondering, how did they even do this? I mean, now of course, we have email and, WhatsApp and this thing. It's so easy to log on, check out all the schools. Those days, actually, even in the 80s, when I sort of, looked at studying here, early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, you still had to mail your applications, and it would take a month for the, whatever prospectus to arrive and stuff like that. When to do that in the 60s, without cell phone, email, WhatsApp. I mean, not even rotary phones were tough to. It was expensive to call US. So that was how this the book began. And in fact, there are 2 chapters in the book devoted to her mother's journey, and I just found it incredible. And then she comes here, embraces and gets into the whole black system and black culture, and brings her girls up as black. And a truly tough woman. She's inherited a lot of toughness from her mom. Her mom herself, I think, in an interview, says she comes from a long line of kick-ass women. I never had the good fortune of meeting her mother. I wish I did go to California fairly often in the 90s, but never met her. Truly remarkable woman, tough as nails. Brought up her daughters with incredible, discipline and energy, inculcated amazing values in them, and stood by them actually as they navigated their way through politics. And Kamala's early political years, there were a lot of times when she was attacked again, because she was minority. She was out there, very outspoken, very blunt. And there were political attacks against her, about some of them about her relationship. But her mother stood by her, and stood by her every inch of the way. Her mother was always by her side at campaigns, at the swearing in. I remember reading about her being there for her swearing in as the district attorney. And it was just a remarkable feat by a single Indian woman. We are so used to hearing Indian success stories in the US, and typically the mothers are always strong, but they always stay-at-home mothers. A lot of people ask me, how come Indians win so many prizes and awards, and they do so well academically in business? And I always say part of the reason is because many Indian families have stay-at-home moms who actually bring stability and discipline in the kids.
Strict mothers.
I'm sorry?
Strict mothers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so because when the kids come home from school, mom's there to, straighten them out and say, come on, do your homework. But here was Shyamala Gopalan Harris, who was a professional. She was a scientist. She was, from all accounts, a brilliant scientist who worked long hours, but she still, brought up 2 girls in a very, very successful manner. And that's also the amazing story, that there was this black support system, which helped her. And so you can understand, Kamala Harris' gratitude towards the Black constituency and her, Black family.
Mhm. So coming to her work and basically her profile, these are early days, I understand, but a lot has happened within this, first 6, 7 months, 8 months. The fact that, from the withdrawal in Afghanistan to COVID management to so many things to Quad, at least from India's perspective, also, we've seen the Prime Minister visit. So coming to Kamala Harris, do you think going forward, her job is going to get tougher? How is it different from other vice presidents that we have seen? Is it going to be difficult for her? Or do you think just because she's a woman, the scrutiny would be more on her? I mean, people would like to see how she behaves or performs as a vice president compared to, let's say, a Mike Pence or even before that.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, the bar is always, higher for women in every sphere of life. And she has an incredible, range of incredible portfolio with many subjects. And you also have a president who's not, in the pink of health. I mean, it's not like, he's a doddering old man like many people project him to be. He's actually fairly sharp. But he's also made it plain. He himself has very often, said that she's going to do the grunt work, and he's been happy to, upload her with a lot of, grunt work. So the thing I've noticed is, look, I've been here 27 years, and I've seen 4 presidencies. 3 of them were 2-term presidencies, so 8 years each. I can't recall an instance. I mean, typically, so there's actually a whole chapter in the book on the vice presidency. It's because the vice presidency of the United States is just an incredible office. For the longest time, it was almost laughed at. Vice presidents didn't even have a home. And, there's a vice president who died on a railway platform, and some of them are penniless, broke, drunkards, all kinds of, disreputable characters became vice president. And there's this famous quote that somebody said, the vice president is not even worth a bucket of warm spit, But moving into the 70s and 80s, the office gradually began to acquire, greater heft. And but even into the 90s, vice presidents typically handled, one big portfolio. Like Al Gore, for instance, was totally into, environment and technology. That was his too big this thing. He seldom bothered with other stuff. And then there was Dick Cheney, whose forte was global politics, defense, also because he was a former defense guy. But he didn't handle too many of domestic issues. So they always had, and Dick Cheney's sort of defense emphasis came also because George Bush was a relative novice in office. He had no foreign policy experience. He was a governor of Texas. So one big portfolio. Pence too, actually, Trump walked all over him. So, but with Kamala Harris, I mean, she's truly a workhorse, and she's being used as a workhorse, and Biden has made absolutely no secret of that. So she has an extraordinary range of work, including heading the Space Force, and I have no idea what prompted that, other than the fact that her mother was a scientist, but she herself, I don't see any great. I mean, she has a passion about science, but she's not into it. So. Yeah, I mean, she has a job ahead of her. If she succeeds in resolving or making a success of any of these portfolios, it'll do well for her future career. But it's a long, hard slog.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So my last question to you will be something that is there in everyone's mind, but also the fact that this administration calls itself. Biden-Harris administration,
Right.
We've never heard a Trump-Pence administration or a Obama and Biden administration. So the fact that this is known as Biden-Harris administration, is that an indication also to the fact that, yes, there will come a time, after 2024, where she can become the president, but my point is, what is it that she needs to do to prove herself that, yes, she's fit for that position?
Yeah, first she needs to navigate this very treacherous, sexist, patriarchal world. I mean, that's plain. The thing is, everyone is waiting for her to fail, right? It's a brutal world, and the media scrutiny is immense. No vice president has had such scrutiny. I mean, you see critical reports of Kamala Harris every single day. You open the right-wing press, Breitbart or Daily Mail. I mean, invariably there's a story on Kamala Harris. I mean, starting with the most trivial stuff, about how she laughs. She's got a laughter which is not pleasant, or how she smirks, or how she dresses, or everything. And in a sense, that's women are subjected to that a lot in this world, not just in the US, across the world. I mean, people are always ready to notice, a dress or a hairstyle which they think, doesn't go well. Nobody ever talks about that, about male politicians. I mean, you could be wearing a tie with a soup stain on it and people will laugh and say, oh, they'll treat it as a joke. But with women, the scrutiny is, quite intense. It's often very sexist. So she has to navigate that world. And I don't think the US, or for that matter, many countries are ready to accept, women on equal terms as men. The bar is very high. So she has to do a lot of things very successfully, and most of all, navigate the dynamics within her own party. I mean, the Democratic Party is a microcosm of America, I guess. So very often, there are attacks within our party. I mean, right now, this whole crisis with, the budget and infrastructure bill and immigration. Forget Republicans. Within the Democratic Party, it's incredible how much infighting is going on. There's very often they call it the circular firing squad, because everyone's shooting at everybody within the Democratic Party. So she has first to navigate her way through her own party. And also, I get the sense, at least so far, she has not put together a team, a good team. So there's this sense of, there have been many reports that she heads a very dysfunctional office. I did sense that too. So she's got to get a lot of things right, starting with her own office within the Democratic Party before, she even thinks of the presidential nomination. So again, there's 3 years, a lot could happen. Of course, there's always this, I call it the movie fantasy that she could accidentally become, the president, because Biden is old, but he's certainly not in bad health. And, I personally see Biden serving out his term. But I also see a big fight. In many ways, Biden has, simply by virtue of, the Biden-Harris administration and frequently referring to her and bringing her into literally everything. I mean, in the first few months, there was not an event in the White House where Kamala Harris was not present. On every major occasion, every major announcement, any major initiative, she was always there by his side. So in that sense, she was the heir apparent, but they both have to, it's not just Kamala Harris, even to win a second term for any Democratic nominee, forget Kamala Harris, there is a lot of work to be done in terms of achieving some kind of stability and progress.
Well, thank you so much on that note, Mr. Rajghatta. Let me show the book again, and if you also have a copy of it, Kamala Harris, Phenomenal Woman.
Thank you.
Publication.
I'll have to reach for it. Is that okay?
No, that's all right. So this is for our viewers. It's a Harper Collins publication. And, we are releasing the book on the print softcover. Congratulations. It's a fantastic book. And I hope the book does well. And thank you for talking to us. You please take it.
Thank you very much. It's been nice talking to you. Thank you, Nayanima.